As well as the war in Ukraine, Russia's influence is being felt in Western Africa. Countries fighting domestic terrorism, such as Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, have turned to Moscow for help. The Kremlin has also started an aggressive campaign to attract more African students to Russia. Our correspondent, Fanny Facsar, reports from the Nigerian capital, Abuja.
The Russian consulate in Abuja. Here in Nigeria's capital, locals are queuing up to try to get visas to live and study in Russia.
Oh, Russia is amazing when it comes to scholarship. They're willing to educate our people at next to nothing.
It's basically the educational system over there. Then also the reception to foreign students, especially Africans.
Filming here is delicate. Most visa applicants we meet don't want to speak on camera, worried it might not be helpful for their applications.
Many of these people putting their hopes in Russia are planning to study there. Now, until a couple of years ago, they'd more likely be wanting to go to Ukraine for further education. But since Russia's full-scale invasion turned Ukraine into a war zone, more are making plans to go to cities like Moscow.
Kingsley stood in that consulate queue last week. Now he's got his Russian visa.
So I was so excited that very day. I wasn't myself anymore. I was just jumping.
There's nothing to keep him in Nigeria.
The job opportunities here is very, very not encouraging. Inflation, even if you get a job, the payments, you can't sustain yourself with it. So I said to myself, do I really need to stay here?
Kingsley's getting ready to go to Novgorod in central Russia in a few weeks. That's where he will learn how to teach English to Russian students. Everything is paid for by Russia, except for the flights, he says.
The scholarship covers the tuition fee, your accommodation, and then you have a stipend, monthly stipend. So I believe with the monthly stipend, I can balance my life at the moment, study, and then get a job there.
The number of students leaving places like this in Africa to study in Russia has tripled in the past decade. Russia's education ministry says there are around 35,000 Africans currently studying in Russia, including more than 1,000 Nigerians. Gali Sharif is researching emerging powers like Russia and their influence in Africa. He says Russia is making it easier to get a visa.
Russia is also doing that to its own advantage. You come, you study, we give you scholarship, join our military, if possible, you give us the support. Of course, every state is after its own national interest. So the interest of Putin is we need more people to come to Russia, help us achieve our goals either in war or in economy.
Kingsley speaks no Russian. His source of information, social media, and a Nigerian friend in Russia.
Yeah, is there anything it's making you worried, in terms of the whole political situation via Russia-Ukraine?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any war. Everybody is living their life. There's no problem in Russia.
But Kingsley is worried. He's heard about foreigners who've ended up in the Russian military.
First, if Russia asked me to join the military at some point, I would be shocked. And as a person, I wouldn't go for it because that wasn't my main motive of coming to the country. My motive is to come study for my master's. By the grace of God, I'll be safe.
Nigeria has been a strong ally of the United States. But Western powers are losing influence in the region, and Russia is taking active steps to win African hearts and minds.
Beverly Ochieng is a security analyst at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. She joins us from Dakar in Senegal. Welcome to DW. Let's start with how Russia benefits by attracting African students.
I mean, definitely there's a lot of human capital if you're looking at the African continent. As you pointed out in the report, it's tripled in the last decade. There are a lot of young people who are looking for opportunities, whether it's working, whether it's studying outside of the continent, because there's already a lot of pressure, there's unemployment, and some education opportunities are not as accessible or available. It's much more difficult to get visas to be able to go to Western countries for education or even for work. And Russia is trying to use this as a way of not just incentivizing people to go in, but also taking advantage of the growing capital of young people looking for work, looking for studies, who are able to work to a high capacity to be able to bring them into the country and give them the education opportunities and the work opportunities that they're looking for.
OK, so that's a benefit. The hope is that once they go into Russia and are educated, that they stay and take up well-paid jobs and pay their taxes and all the rest of it.
I mean, they would possibly be adding into the economy. They'd also be able to add into the human capital back home, because part of these exchanges, if you look at them, some of them are government.
Forgive me for interrupting you, because I'm trying to get to what Russia gets out of this.
I mean, in the long run, Russia is building influence across the region. Education is one way. They've had a long-standing military cooperation across the region. I know there are certain concerns, and you've seen in the report, that these students might end up being recruited to the frontline in Ukraine. And this is bound to happen, given that there had been past evidence of instances where students either found themselves the frontline or even former convicts. But as you've seen, some of the students themselves have said that they would resist any attempts to end up in the frontline. But ultimately, Russia is looking to the continent to be able to build, whether it's commercial influence, military influence, economic influence, and political influence. And this is just one of the ways, including diplomatic bilateral partnerships. During the Russia-Africa summit, we did see the Kremlin talking about how Africa is the center for power and information, and they are pivoting towards the region and making pledges that then enable them to have geopolitical standing in the region.
OK. The other side of this issue, of course, is how this brain drain, if I can call it that, affects the economic prospects of countries like Nigeria.
I mean, yes, there's definitely the concern that some of the brightest or some of the people who would ideally be adding to the economy are being taken away from it. But the truth is, if you're looking at some of those circumstances, there are very few opportunities for economic growth. Nigeria is one of the most densely populated countries on the continent. Economic opportunities are becoming few and far between, so people are looking outwards towards that. Whether that's coming back home to develop is another issue altogether. If you look at some of the political upheaval that has been building, not just in West Africa, but even in East Africa and Kenya, where the protests were taking place, part of it is because young people do not feel that they are being represented by the political class. They are looking outwards for opportunities. People do want to legitimately invest back home, but when there are very few opportunities, then they are likely to seek for opportunities that are externalized, as Russia is doing.
Good talking to you. Thank you for that. Beverly Ochieng from the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you so much.